I am a woman over 50 years old. God has blessed me with a significant portion of beauty in my youth. I grew up in a respectable family, most of whose members hold prestigious positions. I graduated from university and got married 25 years ago. We had a child who brought us joy. And then my husband and I were contracted to work in a Gulf country with 2 salaries. We traveled together, and our life system there became we would go out together for work in the morning, and after work hours ended, my husband would wait for me in the car in front of my workplace. We would return to our home to eat. An hour or so after lunch, my husband would go out to the cafe, where his group of friends was waiting for him. He would stay out until 10 p.m., while my young child and I remained alone until his return. I tried at the beginning to persuade my husband not to prolong his hours away from home, but I failed. I resigned myself to my life and adapted to it. The ship of life sailed on, with us cooperating in family expenses and splitting what remained of our salaries equally after that. Each of us kept it in a personal bank account in their own name. Life went on, and I spent most of my time with my only child at home. When he reached the age of 10, I gave birth to a daughter, so he had a sister who eased some of his loneliness. 2 years later, I gave birth to another daughter, and we had 3 children who brought us joy and filled our lives. 15 years passed in our expatriation, so we decided to resign from our work and return to settle in our home country. After returning, we thought about what work my husband could engage in after he lost his job during the long years abroad. My husband decided to start a commercial project, and he had no prior experience in it, so the project cost more than it should have and faltered shortly after, resulting in large losses. I advised my husband to stop it before it consumed everything he owned, but he did not listen to me and continued working on it. The losses continued and grew until they consumed all of the capital and burdened him with debts to banks and individuals. My husband turned to me, asking for my help to pay off his debt so he wouldn't face imprisonment, and he wept, moved. I did not hesitate to stand by his side because he is the father of my children. I disposed of what I owned and gave him the money to pay off his debts, and nothing worth mentioning remained for me. As a result of these psychological pressures, along with my sadness over the loss of the sweat of my and my husband's lives and the future of my children, I developed diabetes, which led to a worsening of my leg movement. I was also attacked by severe pain in my spine and knees. A long treatment journey began, and my husband, after we had dreamed of stability in Egypt, was forced to emigrate once again to provide us with the necessities of life. He traveled alone to one of the countries of the diaspora. I remained with my children in Egypt, waiting for my husband to obtain the right of legal residency there after 5 years, so that we could join him and continue life together. To be fair, my husband did not abandon us in his expatriation. He began sending us enough money to cover our necessary expenses and calls us regularly every week. The second separation has worn down his feelings, and I have begun to hear from him on the phone tender words that I did not hear while we were living together in one house. This is after long years of the silence he used to cling to during most of our time together. I became satisfied with our fates and what they imposed on us, that we must start over, and I considered what happened to us as one of the harsh tests. My hopes were pinned on my children progressing in their studies until I could join my husband and the family could be reunited once again. I eased the matter for myself by thinking that no matter how many difficulties we faced, they would not be harsher than what we had been through and endured. Then, my university student son struck me with a new catastrophe. After hesitation, and while struggling with his shyness and embarrassment, he confessed to me that he has not yet reached manhood, and that he has no connection to men except for a beard and thick body hair. As for his psyche,
It is feminine, and his thinking is the same. Therefore, he wants to correct his situation and transition through surgery to become a girl. As I heard this from him, I remembered in those harsh moments that this son, in his childhood, would only play with girls of his own age and with their feminine toys, especially dolls, during my visits to my friends abroad while my husband was away with his friends at the cafe. I also remembered that I often surprised him as a child wearing women's shoes and wandering around the house in them in the peak of happiness. I would draw his attention to the impermissibility of that because he was a boy. I shared my observations about him with my husband, but he did not dwell on them and saw that it was natural for a boy to play with girls. The result was that he continued to befriend girls as a child. Then the childhood period passed, and that expression of it ceased. He became withdrawn. Symptoms of depression began to appear, and he started to struggle in his university studies. I thought of my memories as he asked me to help him solve this problem. The world went dark for me again. Then I gathered my willpower and began trying to treat him. I took him to 10 senior doctors in various specialties, and some of them gave him male hormones, which I would read to him so he would not evade them. Despite that, it did not yield any result with him. Finally, the senior doctors agreed that my only son is suffering from a rare disease called transsexuality, which means a person's mismatch with their gender. It is an incurable disease, and accordingly, my only son is a man anatomically, but he is female psychologically and mentally. And there is no solution to this situation except by two things: transitioning via surgery to become a female and living the life of a girl in her thinking and psyche, or staying as he is until he ends his life with his own hand one day, because he cannot live with this disease to the end. I strongly opposed my son in the beginning regarding performing the transition surgery and asked him to consider himself a disabled person and live with his disability, endure his fate, and be patient with it. But he was unable to continue. He tried to commit suicide more than once and was afflicted with severe psychological depression that neither drugs nor psychological therapy sessions, which lasted a year and a half, benefited. He began to treat me with extreme harshness, and when he calms down, he weeps in front of me, repentant for what he did to me. I endured all this hardship with great patience and confessed to my husband about his condition and his need to undergo the surgery, and I asked for his approval for it as a calamity that is more merciful than the calamity of suicide or continued suffering. My husband refused insistently, and in one of his calls, he decided on his refusal and emphasized that proceeding with the transition surgery is blasphemy. My son flew into a rage and told his father that he is a believer in God and his messenger, but he is not to blame for his rare condition. Then he collapsed, weeping. Finally, I gathered my willpower again, and I do not know how God helped me endure all these disasters. I wrote a 10-page letter to my husband after the psychiatrist confirmed to me the impossibility of living with this condition, and that it would lead to an inevitability, the suicide of my son one day. I told him in my letter that our son is a miserable person. His disease is rare and incurable. He will not find anyone who will accept him as a husband in his current situation, and he will not have descendants if he insists on remaining in the male gender, hoping for that hope. And that I, as a mother, want him alive, even if he becomes a female or even becomes a monkey. He is in the end my son, the piece of my heart that I suffered in carrying, giving birth to, and saw with my heart before he came into the world from the unseen realm, and I will not bear losing him completely one day. He thought about it.
refused again and is still insistent on his position. My son is still insistent on the surgery and considers it his only hope to get rid of his torments. I am living the worst days of my life between the two, and I do not want to lose my husband, who is struggling for the sake of the family in this expatriation at this age, and is waiting with patience for his right of residency to be granted so he can come to visit us and take us with him. At the same time, I do not want to lose the life of my poor son, who is sick with a rare disease he was born with and is unable to live with. It concerns me before all of that to know the opinion of religion in my situation, because I am keen on the satisfaction of my Lord. So what should I do? In the end, I say there is no limit to human pain, and no end to all that appears to have reached its limit. Whenever a person thinks that they have experienced all kinds of pain and tasted all its bitterness, life sometimes surprises them with what never crossed their mind before. This latest type is your new ordeal, my dear lady. May God help you endure it. However, true courage is always in being patient with adversities and dealing with them with a realistic logic that accepts what fate has brought first, then is active in treatment, managing, and mitigating damages. There is no doubt that you, my dear lady, in addition to all your pains, are in a truly difficult position between two parties, each of whom has their strong argument and their own private torment that no one knows about. The father is shocked with the shock of a lifetime after all he has been through with his only son, from whom he hoped, like any other father, to continue life and for him to carry his name after him. The son, on the other hand, is governed by fates he has no way out of, and he is tormented by the fact that he is not a man, but a prisoner of a gender whose characteristics he does not possess and does not align with. The only way out of this crushing ordeal, in my estimation, is to appeal to the opinion of experts and follow their advice in what does not conflict with the rulings of religion, no matter how shocking this advice may be to your feelings and disappointing to the hopes of any parents for their child. Approach your son's psychiatrists again, my dear lady, and ensure, without leaning towards sympathy with your son's desire, of the impossibility of him living with his painful situation permanently. This is because it will inevitably lead him to suicide one day, which is, as far as I know, the final fate of most of those who do not align with their gender in many cases. If they confirm this to you with a decisive opinion in which there is no room for hesitation or alternatives, they are just witnesses to the state of necessity that permits forbidden things, mandates this surgery, removes from your son the suspicion of convenience or following the whims of the self, and presents these reliable testimonies.